Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Louisville Emergency Operations Center. I know it is a beautiful summer morning, but we are here to talk about the cleanup from some real challenging weather that we had earlier this spring and the partnerships that we're working with at the state and federal level to help individuals that have been impacted by the storms that started in early April with the tornado that came through the J-Town area, with the extreme historic flooding, the 8th largest flood in our city's history that we saw just a few weeks before Derby, and the impact that it has made on individuals and the resources that are available to individuals to help them with their cleanup that they've been doing since that time. I do want to give a big thanks to Governor Beshear and everyone from Kentucky Emergency Management for all of their help with all of these far too often natural disasters that we've been dealing with, and also to our partners at FEMA. Thank you all for your continued support of what we've been doing here at the public and individual levels for individuals and the community that's been impacted. Now, I know this happened a few months ago, and the process can seem slow, but we do have a process in place that's set forth at the state and federal levels to try to help individuals who have been impacted, and so that's what we're here today. We are here to make sure we want to get the word out to every individual in Louisville, Jefferson County that was impacted by these storms to help them get federal assistance for the cleanup on their individual property. And we know that about 1,200 homes and businesses were impacted by the tornadoes and the flooding. And already about 100 families have requested curbside pickup of debris that was on their private property that we have taken care of here at the local level. And about 340 Louisville families have already reached out and applied for federal assistance through FEMA. And now we're here today because FEMA is on the ground in Louisville, reaching out to individuals that were impacted by those storms. The FEMA's Disaster Survivor Assistance Team is going door to door to inform individuals of their eligibility in the FEMA individual assistance process. And there are several ways to apply that our friends from FEMA will tell you about in a minute. There have also been, in addition to going door to door in the south and southwest part of our county, there are also several locations that FEMA is staffing every day. At the J-Town City Hall, at the Anchorage Middletown Fire and EMS, they're open 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And on the weekend, there's at least one pop-up location at the J-Town Farmers Market on Saturday morning from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. And there might be more, so stay tuned on social media. We will keep everybody informed. So you'll hear more from our partners here in the state and at the federal level. Again, I want to thank Governor Beshear and the entire team with the state government that has been a great partner to ours during all of these extreme weather events. And joining us here this morning is Eric Gibson, who's the Kentucky Emergency Management Director, who's going to tell you a little bit more about this partnership. Eric?
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you.
Well, and thank you all for covering this story. We really appreciate the coverage just to create the awareness about the efforts that are ongoing here in Jefferson County. FEMA's on the ground. Kentucky Emergency Management is involved in these registration centers. And the state, local, and federal partnership that you see here before you today, as FEMA is represented along with your local emergency management officials and mayor, along with myself from Kentucky Emergency Management, we're all here for what you typically see is that ongoing state, federal, and local teams working together to create that experience for the survivor where they get the help that they need as quickly as possible, and that they can navigate these systems to make sure that the help flows to the right people. We've been in Louisville a lot lately. Looking back and reflecting before this press conference, I just looked back through our notes at the office this morning. We were here last May for a tornado event that affected the far eastern part of the county, up near the Oldham County line. That was a disaster declaration for individual assistance. We followed it up with a July 4th tornado event that struck downtown, the west part of the community. The mayor, the governor, and I both walked those streets talking to those survivors and saw those impacts in that neighborhood. While that wasn't a federally declared disaster, your local emergency management officials were supported by the state, making sure that the survivors got some attention that they needed. Their needs were being met. And then again, we followed up March the 30th. A tornado event went across the southern part of the city. And then April 2nd, another tornado impacted along the I-64 going west corridor. Many businesses and homes were impacted by that. And then that followed up by a flooding event that tremendously impacted. That was the April 2nd event, was the flooding event that started and spread throughout our state and also impacted Jefferson County. And that's the disaster declaration, the 4864 disaster declaration that the president has signed and give FEMA the authority to help our citizens here in Jefferson County. Again, many, many events, and through all these events, you see the same approach. Locally led. You have a great team of emergency managers that are very much supported by their government officials. Mayor Greenberg does an excellent job. He's always on the ground there to support. And I think that says a lot for how the community is prepared for these events. You can see that you all are in the EOC today that stays staffed and ready all the time. Director Myman does a great job of making sure that Jefferson County is prepared for these events. Kentucky Emergency Management over in Frankfort stands ready to support the Jefferson County team anytime that they request or when they need to petition for a federal declaration. And that's our role in this, is we do the damage assessments with them. We help provide the documentation to FEMA to request those disaster assistance declarations. And that's what we're talking about here today. This newest declaration, the work's being done. The workers from FEMA are on the ground, and we want our community members to know when they encounter a FEMA employee that they are talking to a legitimate person that's there to provide assistance. And that's why we have a press conference like this, to make sure that the word is spread amongst our community members, that they know that there is help on the way and that their needs are being met. I just have to say that, emergency management stands ready to continue to support. We have staff that are in those disaster recovery centers that you can ask for any of your unmet needs to be addressed, and we're there to support those centers that are being operated in conjunction with our FEMA folks. I have to continue to just say that, the governor's been here throughout these disasters. It's important to note how well that they work with Mayor Greenberg to make sure that the community in whole is taken care of when there is an event like this. We were down here on the 4th of July together. We're down here prior to the Derby this year when all this flooding was ongoing, and there was debris across the riverfront that was causing to make some hard decisions about how the Derby Festival was being handled. And so what is important to realize is the state and local effort are very much aligned, along with those needs being met by the FEMA folks that are in town. And with that, I'd like to introduce our federal coordinating officer, Jeremy Slinker, who is here to talk a little bit about the impacts and the work that FEMA's doing here in the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. First, I just say appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about the ongoing recovery efforts in Kentucky and specifically here in Jefferson County. As Director Gibson stated, I'm the federal coordinating officer for FEMA in Kentucky now, as related to the three most recent federally declared events from February, the April 2nd, which we're here talking about today, and then of course the most recent one just a week or so ago in southern Kentucky and western Kentucky here in May. So, federal coordinating officer, that the title says what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to come in. I'm supposed to coordinate federal resources to support local and state recovery efforts. And it starts with response, and then we transition into recovery. And so, you may have seen a lot of those efforts out in the field. And I just say the reason we are progressing well is that partnership that you hear over and over. And I know maybe we say it over and over. Every one of us, the local and the state and the federal, then say it. But if you take one leg of that away, it's not going to work very well, because we all have roles. And when we start trying to do each other's roles, it won't happen very well. And here, we just don't have that. I think Director Gibson and his team set the tone early. We're one team. He's communicated that out widely, and everybody has accepted that graciously and with smiles. And now you're just seeing some extraordinary work being done by the one team that's out there. Louisville Metro here and Jefferson County, as well as Kentucky Emergency Management. And I guess before I get into a few of the details, I'd just say also, I am a Kentuckian, so I think I can say this safely, that Kentuckians are strong and they're resilient, and As you heard, they've been hit hard a few times in the last months and years, but we come back and we rebuild and we come back better and stronger, and we get ready for whatever comes next. So again, I'm witnessing that every day. I'm proud to be here and be able to say that I'm seeing that across the state as we're challenged with a few of these things. So a couple things, that I'll mention. We're here kind of in Jefferson County, and you're part of the April 2nd severe storms and flooding that had 13 counties declared on April the 24th, and there was an additional 24 counties added on May the 14th. And that's where Jefferson County come into play. So we're just talking a week or so ago, and so a lot of the work you heard is things just that's been accomplished in a matter of days. And I will say in some cases, sometimes that does take weeks, but here we're talking about a lot of movement in just a matter of days with that local and state efforts that we're able to get in there and support. And in that, once a county's declared and designated in a major disaster, then there's some things we can bring to bear. This was individual assistance. So here we're to help people. And we're to help people with their individuals and households program. That's where, if their home's been damaged, we might be able to help with repairs. We may also be able to help with if they were displaced, maybe get them into a safe and secure place to stay for a few days. And then we can roll on into rental assistance if they're displaced for a long time. And we can provide rental assistance as they may lease a place or rent a place to cover their gap in permanent housing. So those are things we're working on. But you heard about a disaster survivor assistance teams. That's the face of FEMA. They do phenomenal work. You do see them out in the neighborhoods, usually a FEMA vest, much brighter because they're on the street and walking on the sidewalks, and they want to be noticed. So they'll knock on the door, and they offer that first initial, what do I do next? And they'll tell you, apply for FEMA. And they can help you do that right there. They usually carry iPads, and they can get right on and start supplying those. And, we face challenges in a lot of places about internet for the iPads, but we'll get some portable internet capabilities, and we'll go right out and make sure we're registering people and letting them apply, because that's the first step. But you also heard us that we opened some more fixed locations, disaster recovery centers. That's very important. They do a couple different things. This early on, a disaster recovery center is going to be FEMA raising their hand along with, because all our disaster recovery centers have multiple resources in them, not just FEMA. So there's state resources, local resources, private nonprofit resources like the American Red Cross. They're all in there. But we're raising our hands saying we're here to help. We're here to help. And they do play a good role for those that, either elect not to apply online or just not something they're comfortable with, and they want to go in person, sit down and talk to somebody face to face about how to apply for FEMA assistance. So we got that set for them. Now, as this carries on for the next weeks and months, it's a good place to go in and work through your case, because you'll initially apply, and then there's going to be some questions. A home inspector is going to need to call the homeowner and set up a home inspection. So you get all kinds of crazy numbers from different states. And so this is one of those times, if you're like me, you may hit the red button on these unknown numbers. But if you've been damaged by the storm, you may need to answer them, because it may be the home inspector wanting to schedule their inspection with you. They'll come out, do an inspection, put it in our system, and then they'll evaluate what you applied for, and then how that fits into the program and the policies. And then you may get some communication back in the form of a letter and says you need additional documents. Because we also want to make sure, we set the right expectation. Insurance is always first. And I think you all may get a lot of questions about that. Insurance is always first. So that's one thing. If you've got insurance, that'll be one of the first questions. And then you might need to submit some insurance documents to show what you have claimed and what was covered. But some of that takes some back and forth. And sometimes it's just easier to go to a place in person, sit across from somebody, an expert, and help you work through that until you get your case to the right point where you know what you're eligible for and you start receiving that assistance. Some of that assistance is immediate. Serious needs assistance, possibly clean and sanitize if you got documentation where you had to clean out your house. Some of those we can get right away, and then home repairs, we work into some of those longer cases. But 3 days after the designation of Jefferson County, we're opening one of those facilities. And again, so FEMA's got a lot of parts of that. You know, we've got trucks, it's got tables and chairs, and we can provide internet. We've got staffing that'll roll in quick. But without our local partners identifying the locations and telling us this is where we would like it, this is near the impacted area, this is where it's accessible, we wouldn't have it. And again, the state does a lot of that intermediate between us with, we got to do use agreements and different things. And normally that's a lot of government stuff going on. But Mayor Greenberg and his staff here, along with Eric and Team Kentucky, you know, those have been hours and not days worth of stuff. So we're there helping people in those disaster recovery centers, and those disaster survivor assistance folks are walking the neighborhood to get those initial applications rolling. And then what you'll see over time, we'll start dispersing, money. As the mayor said, over 300 households here in Jefferson County has applied for assistance, and we're getting up there, in the 650,000 range to getting close to 700,000 on assistance that's just being provided for Jefferson County. And that's kind of comparative of the 37 total counties in just this one event. Remember, we got 2 events on both ends of this too. But on this one event, we're about $18.5 million been dispersed to 2,400 applicants. So that's some of the progress we're doing as well. I will mention, as every individual assistance has a deadline for registrations. That's June 25th, so we still have a lot of time, but I talk about it every time because I want to make sure, people know that and they are applying and they're going out there and getting their application in, and it gives us time to work through all those nuances that I've talked about. So I think that's the details I have. I think it'd be appropriate to turn it back to Mayor Greenberg now for any questions.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. So again, just to reiterate, please, we want people to apply by the end of June. If you have suffered damage as a result of any of these storms, you've heard about all of the ways you can apply to FEMA for individual assistance online. If someone comes to your door, and also the locations that we have at Jeffersontown City Hall, at Anchorage Middletown Fire Department and EMS, pop-up locations like at the J-Town Farmers Market. This Saturday, the other locations, they're out there 7 days a week working to help people who were impacted by the storm get reimbursements for their expenses beyond insurance, as you just heard. So we hope everybody takes advantage of this support from FEMA. And with that, we're happy to take any questions from members of the media.
Jeremy, this FEMA assistance, is this loans or is this just loans?
No, this is grant funding, lack of a better word, but it's not a loan and it doesn't have to be paid back. That's FEMA assistance. But you bring up a good point, if I may. In those disaster recovery centers and then in some business recovery centers that are open as well, our partners with Small Business Administration are also in town issuing low interest loans for those impacted by storms.
And the mayor mentioned 1,200 homes and businesses up back here in Jefferson County in April 2nd. Is there a price tag on how much damage we've had here?
Well, not at this time. I think we're still working through that. And, when we'll come out with a good estimate as we get as we start seeing the number of applicants, because sometimes early on, we know what's visible and what people have reported to us. But then once we start getting out in the community, we start finding more and more.
Jeremy, did you say so far you guys have done, just want to clarify some numbers, 700,000 in assistance for Jefferson County and then 18.4 million across the state?
In this event, and I think I said just short of 700,000, so I don't be caught in that. Just short of 700,000. We're right around 650, but sometimes when you get your talking points, I'll see a report before I walk in here too. So just shy of 700,000, I'm comfortable saying. And then 18.5 million on the streets in this one event. Now, much more than that in the two other events added.
And one thing also, we're just talking today about the individual assistance. So that FEMA is providing to individuals. There's also the public assistance, what the city's expenses were for cleanup, MSD's expenses were. That's separately with a separate declaration that is still pending in Washington.
Can I run a hypothetical by you? So, let's say, let's say somebody gets like 50% of their home's value from flood insurance. Is there anything FEMA can do about reimbursing them for the structure past that point, or is that a dead end?
It's very case specific, so it is very hard for me to take a general hypothetical and say yes or no. What I will say, I would apply, because there is some possibilities for that if you're underinsured in some areas, or parts of your house was insured, but parts of your house were not. So those parts that your house were not could become eligible, or like I said, there's some room in there for underinsured.
I read about like a grant program. Apparently it requires some cooperation between local and state governments, but basically local and state governments can buy up flooded properties, but they get grant money from FEMA. Is that being explored right now at all?
I'd turn that over to Director Gibson. They manage the program.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're referring to our hazard mitigation buyout program, and we've worked on that in the Eastern Kentucky floods, are the ones that we've had so much success with. We've worked through 530 properties on the that's that 22 storm that I'm talking about, not the one from the spring. But we have asked for the hazard mitigation program in this disaster, and it's also under that pending review status, just like our public assistance is right now. I truly do hope that the public assistance and the hazard mitigation portions of our declaration request from the governor to the president are signed, because that does allow that conversation to begin. If there are members of the community that are willing, that are in flood prone areas, numerous events of flooding, and it's easy. The solution to the problem is to move to a higher location. In Eastern Kentucky, you often hear us refer to the high ground communities that we've taken on as an initiative to build in many of those communities an area where people can relocate out of the floodplain and build them a home that will not flood. And we do run those programs through Kentucky Emergency Management. Right now, this particular disaster is still pending. And I am truly hopeful, and I do believe that it is a good program, and I think that the analysis that are being done at the federal level will see the value of the program as it relates to the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Is that a county request?
Hazard mitigation is typically a statewide, but the impacted counties are the ones that we focus on, because it's those disaster dollars it's a percentage of the overall cost of the disaster that's returned to the state to manage the hazard mitigation program.
Do we have a timeline at all on what that can take?
No, we see that it takes some of the declaration requests. If you refer back to the one last Memorial Day that impacted a lot of our state, it's not unusual for it to be 30 or 40 days beyond the disaster before a final decision is made. And there's always a timeline, and there's a lot of disasters nationwide that are being under those review processes. And as this, works its way through the channels, I think that there's plenty of evidence for the value of the public assistance, as many, many counties have been impacted. But then the hazard mitigation program truly returns a real value to the Commonwealth and to the federal government as it removes that home from being another disaster in the future.
Yes. Hold on one second.
Are there any areas that you can identify as harder hit when it comes to this FEMA relief?
Yeah, so in terms of parts of the city that were hardest hit, the south and southwest, really the southwest corner of our city was hardest hit by the floods in terms of the individual impact. Of course, downtown and along the river here, moving east, there was significant impact from the floods. Most of that was dealt with on public property and our public response to the floods that we had. So individual impact on the floods in the southwest, and then more in the east and northeastern parts of our city from the tornadoes. So that's why we have set up in Anchorage and in J-Town, because that's where the bulk of the damage was, particularly in this photo right here is from J-Town that we visited the day after the tornado struck, right there in the Commerce Park.
So just to clarify, this is individual assistance, not necessarily like the business owner of this daycare that was hit, or
Well, sorry, individual businesses are eligible too, versus the public, so the city. So for example, we talked a lot about the city's response, and we had amazing people on our public works team and Jody in the emergency management team that were all responding, but that outside contractor that we use, or MSD's costs that they incurred as a result of the flood, that's public. That's a different declaration that we're awaiting to be declared, that the governor has signed, and we're awaiting that federal approval of that. This is for basically private individuals or businesses and their private damages that they suffered on private property.
Why is there not a disaster recovery center in the Southwest if that's was hard hit?
Right now, we're going literally door to door.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, the impacted areas along the river in the southwest part of the county were much more isolated and smaller, and they've already walked those areas and walked those streets. So it was just easier to start out there, and now they're going out into the neighborhoods out in the southwest part of the county as well.
For Eric and Jeremy on southeastern Kentucky, if I may. How's recovery efforts happen going in Laurel and Pulaski counties? And have you guys put any numbers to that event down there? How many homes or businesses damaged? The cost of the price tag of the damage?
Well, it's very early on in that event. Obviously, we're still in the response phase. There's debris being removed. We're moving travel trailers into those communities now to shelter people. We have our ongoing damage assessments going on. The initial look at it, people have thrown out numbers. I've heard numbers like 400 homes. We did a more close house by house damage assessment. We sent our teams back out to just get good documentation on every home. Tremendous impact to the communities. Russell, Pulaski, and Laurel have all been tremendously impacted in this event. And there was other tornadoes. Union County had a lot of damage. Judge Onan out there, and I spoke, he actually was the first county impacted. And then we had a tornado that went through Todd County and did some damage. So a lot of counties had some damage in this, but particularly Russell, Pulaski, and then Laurel. Laurel is a community that has been, one certain area there is truly devastated. The EF4 170-mile-an-hour wind part of the storm, as it gained its strength near that interstate there where it crossed through Sunshine Hills and into that other area just across before it hit the airport, crossed through the airport area. The damage there, those homes are gone. I mean, it's tremendous. And many of you all have probably visited that. Kentucky Emergency Management is working closely with those officials. We have teams on the ground down there still today, making sure that the residents are getting the services that they need, whether that be temporary shelter, volunteer coordination, to making sure we've got the volunteers that are showing up from across our state are getting to the people that are in need of those services. And we have a lot of donations coming in for those communities, and we're trying to manage that to make sure that those are hitting the right spots. Our disaster recovery centers, we have a declaration in place on that disaster. That's disaster 4875. If anybody tunes in and is a victim of that storm and needs to apply for assistance, make sure they apply for the right disaster. And we didn't say that yet today. And because of the ongoing number of storms that we've been impacted by, if you're applying for the one that affected Louisville, 4864. If you're applying for the Laurel Pulaski County disaster, that's 4875. It's imperative that you apply for the correct disaster, or you will fall into a denied queue, and we'll have to work that process to get you back in the right one. But to tell you the overall cost of that is way too early, because that is tremendously a big scope of work there, a tremendous scope of work, I should have said. And when we look at that, but it's important to also talk about the work that's going on. And those local officials are working that debris management to get those areas cleaned up, to make sure that the people that have been displaced have temporary shelter. And we're running that through the Commonwealth Sheltering Program, where we use state parks, we use local motels and hotels, and we also use Airbnb, and we also use our travel trailer program. So we have different ways that we're sheltering people. We're putting people in the travel trailers at Levi Jackson Park. And that's going really well, as we're bringing in trailers every day to kind of continue to build that out as our citizens call Kentucky Emergency Management, or they go by a disaster recovery center and request that kind of assistance. The disaster recovery centers are taking people in every day, getting their registration put in for that disaster. And we've already started to see the flow, disbursement of funds. Very easy to see how much damage was done to those homes. But it's a very good question, and we really appreciate you bringing up those continuing efforts.
Thank you all very much. We'll continue to keep people informed, and please reach out And if you have been impacted, please do reach out to FEMA in any one of these forms that we discussed today. Thank you all very much.